Shocking reporting has just come out. First, The Guardian reported the White House was not considering a nuclear strike on Iran. However, according to Fox News, officials have said they have not ruled out using a nuke and that all options are on the table. According to the Daily Mail, Trump was briefed that the only way to destroy the Iran nuclear facilities at Fordo would be to soften the ground with bunker busters and then drop a nuke, to which Trump has reportedly said, yeah, we shouldn't do that. So the assumptions are now that the reason Trump is saying he will wait and make a decision within 2 weeks, the reason why he's meeting with Steve Bannon and calling Tucker Carlson is that, one, it may be a big ask that we nuke Iran, but actually pull back and say, you know what, we can do this with humans, with boots on the ground. But the reality is we just don't know for sure. All we can do is sit back and wait and probably debate amongst ourselves as to what should be done and what is currently going on. Before we get started, my friends, we got a great sponsor. It is Bearskin Tactical. You may be wondering how it is that it looks so cool as we are doing this show. It's because I'm wearing this bearskin fleece hoodie. That's really, really awesome. It is fantastic. It's got 10 pockets. It's got an outer shell, like a rain jacket that can attach to it. Super cool. 340 GSM. Bearskin micro fleece, stronger, durable. It's actually really light and super comfortable. You maybe notice I wear this all the time now. It's because I really do like it. It starts raining, I can put that outer shell on. It's super cool. My friends, you will get free U.S. shipping, fast domestic delivery, and 60% off if you text TIM to 36912. Again, you can text 36912 right now. Maybe you're driving in your car on your way to work, listen to this podcast, and you're like, I don't got time to click that. Just text real quick. TIM to 36912, and they'll send you a link. You can click whenever you want. You can get that discount, or you can go to baer.skin/Tim to pick up these really cool hoodies. So shout out to Bearskin. Don't forget, also go to castbrew.com and buy some coffee. Use promo code RUMBLE10, and you will get 10% off your order. We got all the different flavors, Appalachian Nights. I personally blended that myself, so check it out. It's my favorite coffee. We got coffee pods and all that good stuff. But don't forget to smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. We got a couple people here to join us in this debate. Ma'am, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. I'm Karys Rhea. Thanks for having me. I'm a producer with the Epoch Times, but nothing I say is maybe associated with them. This is my personal opinion.
Right on.
Is that why you have that for the bugs?
No, the gavel was a gag someone gave to me, but it was like a mosquito hawk just flew by. I was going to whack it.
Oh, yeah, because I feel like there are better ways to...
I must intervene in this conflict between the bugs. And sir, who might you be?
Yeah, I'm Will Thibeau, Army veteran, right on defense policy, in particular for the Claremont Institute in Washington, D.C. Thanks for having me, Tim.
This is great. So all in favor of nuking Iran? Show hands. Nobody?
No.
Nobody wants to nuke Iran. What do you think? You think we should go into that country and remove their government or blow up their nuclear facilities, or what do we do?
Well, I think what we should do depends on what we see unfold in the next few weeks. I think it completely depends on the success of Israel's operation, and I think it depends on what the Iranian people choose to do once the bombs stop falling, excuse me. So, you know, I don't pretend to be so arrogant to have the scenario that we should absolutely commit to, regardless of how the facts on the ground change and how the situation develops.
But are you in favor of regime change?
Depends what you mean by regime change.
Removing the Ayatollah and the structure of government
from the
Iran?
top down. America
Yeah.
doing that? No, I'm not in favor of that.
But you do want, but I don't want to say you do, but would you just want to see that structure of governance in Iran altered, you know, like they remove the Ayatollah and they put something else in?
No doubt. I mean, look, if it comes from the ground up, then why not? I mean, if it comes from the people.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, what do you think?
This is my broader concern with the discussion. I think there's a real risk that the United States and Israel have different desired end states from this conflict. President Trump has been pretty clear. He doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I don't get the same kind of clarity from Israel, perhaps justifiably so, on what their end state is from this operation, whether it be to eliminate the Iranian ballistic missile program, eliminate the nuclear threat permanently, or perhaps more broadly, regime change. I think if the United States intervenes militarily with Israel and they have different end states, that is a recipe for escalation, regardless of the first step the United States takes to intervene. And so we got to figure this out.
I see a lot of people, they don't like the title that the U.S. says nuking Iran is the only option. Let me show you the chain of events here. We have this from Mediaite first. White House denies Trump ruled out using a tactical nuke on Iran. Fox's Heinrich reports. Okay, well, deny that they ruled it out doesn't mean he wants to do it, right? Well, we have this from The Guardian. Trump caution on Iran strike linked to doubts over bunker buster bomb, officials say. There's been numerous reports that the bunker busters don't even have the capability to penetrate Fordo. And the argument is Iran intentionally built a nuclear facility where they knew even U.S. bunker busters would have a difficult time penetrating. And then we have the ongoing live feed from the Daily Mail. Donald Trump is believed to have backed down from military action against Iran, paving the way for diplomatic talks, after realizing that a nuclear strike may have been the only way to completely destroy the buried Fordow enrichment plant. The president is said to have told defense officials it would only make sense for the U.S. to join Israel if its bunker buster bombs are guaranteed to be able to destroy the key enrichment site, according to people familiar with the discussions. Officials were said to have been told the U.S. would have to soften the ground with conventional bombs before dropping a tactical nuclear weapon from a B-2 bomber to completely destroy the site, believed to be some 90 meters underground. But Trump is said to have ruled out nuking Iran, insiders told The Guardian. The possibility was said not to have been raised by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth or Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, during recent meetings in the Situation Room. Fox News then reported the White House has refuted the entire Guardian report, indicating the use of a nuclear weapon had not yet been ruled out. The future of the region hangs in the balance as diplomats scramble to find another solution. There's been an ongoing conversation about whether or not the bunker busters will even work. Jack Posobiec went into great detail on the I believe it's called the BDA, the Battle Damage Assessment, and that the bunker busters are lower yield bombs, but designed to penetrate. So they'll break through the concrete before detonating, in which case, I believe it's 90 meters, about 300 feet. You would need multiple concurrent strikes of bunker busters to hit it.
Well, and they'd have to hit in the same exact spot.
In the crater, right? In the
A bunker buster only penetrates to 200 feet before it can explode.
So at least two.
Right, you need at least two. And they're precise, but it poses, I think, part of the conundrum that many who are hoping President Trump reconsiders military action, because if we take a strike at the Fordo nuclear facility, for example, and it doesn't work, we have still initiated combat action. We've initiated physical participation in offensive war against Iran that makes the 40,000 Americans in the region and all our military assets a target, a frankly legitimate target for Iranian retaliation. And we've done all that without disabling their primary nuclear facility.
But there's not 40,000 people right now. I mean, Trump has already started removing unnecessary troops. He took out all the planes at Al Udeid.
I don't think they're all gone. I mean,
Bahrain, he had the ships leave the harbor.
There are over 1,000 American soldiers in Syria, 4,000, I think, still in Iraq. So, whether it's 40,000 or 4,000.
It's 40. Yeah, 40, 50,000.
There's 40,000 on any given day in the region. But what I'm saying is that Trump has already removed, we don't know how many, but he's already started evacuating some of those troops.
And to be fair, that does include Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt,
Bahrain,
Qatar,
all within range of Iranian.
Yeah, but you think Iran's going to start bombing Qatar?
No, but this is my point. We don't know what happens in the event of an escalation. I deployed to Iraq twice, and our kind of main station was at a base in northern Iraq, where on a clear day I could see the mountains of northwest Iran. And so, there are thousands of American soldiers within that range. That's well within ballistic missile range. Probably wouldn't even take a ballistic missile. And so my point is, okay, perhaps it's not 40,000 Americans directly at risk of retaliation, but how many is too many?
Sure.
And that's something to consider.
Sure. I would push back on this idea that Iran, just because they are a very large and mountainous country and, they have a very sophisticated population, highly educated, civilized, that they are anything other than a paper tiger, which we have seen again and again.
But then
and
why
again.
would the United States need to get involved?
They can't even, look, as long as Israel has the skies right now, and they can't even get a plane off the ground, except the 3 that they've managed to get off the ground to flee the area. You think that America cannot defend itself against an air attack from Iran? I mean, this to me, that's just so ridiculous. The air superiority of America is just it's astronomically more than.
But do you understand the backwards logic here? You're saying that Iran is a paper tiger, so America need not fear retaliation. But at the same time, they are such a formidable military threat that Israel needs our offensive military assistance in order to defeat the threat that Iran poses.
There's multiple things
in the
there.
region.
Not all of those things I said, but I'm just saying that how threatening Iran actually is has to be part of the conversation. It can't just be will they retaliate or not? Of course they're going to retaliate. But what has to be involved in the conversation is their capabilities. And the best way to measure that is to look at past actions that they have taken, like the October 2024 ballistic missile attack, even seeing how they've just responded in the last 7 days to Israel. I mean, yes, of course, they've caused a lot of damage throughout Israel. Yes, there have been 450 missiles that have gone through, and 1,000 drones that they shot, none of which reached Israeli airspace. But
none of the drones did, you're saying?
None of the drones did, yeah. But these ballistic missiles, the amount that they have been sending, have been drastically decreasing with each day. Why do you think that is?
We don't know for sure.
Why? You're asking why is Iran decreasing the amount of missiles that it's firing?
Yeah, it's because they either don't have enough missiles, so they're trying to conserve them. Israel estimates they have 1,000 or something like that. Or it's because they can't get them off the ground because they don't have enough launchers.
That's
one of the arguments that's been made is that Iran's intentionally using lower yield rockets so that they can burn out the Israeli interceptors before launching an actual salvo of destructive ballistic missiles mid-range.
The Wall Street Journal reported today that Israel has depleted almost 60% of their air defense assets. It's easier to shoot a missile than it is to shoot down a missile. And so any decision based on our expectations of the Iranian missile supply, I think is hubristic.
Well, not just that. Sorry to interrupt, but China just flew 3 cargo planes into Iran.
Yeah, but that could be humanitarian for all we know. We have no idea what's in there, and until anybody has any evidence in terms of what those planes contained, then I'm not going to think that China is going to come to Iran's rescue. I mean, China has been laying low. They've already implied that they want nothing to do with it.
That's not material to the point that's being made, in that we are wondering why Iran hasn't launched a larger barrage of higher yield mid-range missiles. And the things to consider tactically would be China's shipping something and we don't know what that is. That's a concern. If Iran is launching these mid-range, lower yield missiles, the strategy is fairly obvious. I'm a layman, and just watching Fox News, and we had an interview with the guy on the show the other day. They're saying, well, obviously, no one's going to launch their stronger warheads knowing Israel's loaded with interceptors. But interceptors are very expensive. So likely what Iran's going to do is they're going to choose a medium yield so they can save the more powerful rockets, burn down some of the interceptors, hope they penetrate that air defense with some strikes that actually will freak people out. They don't want to go. This is what we were told by an expert in the region. They don't want to use low yield because when they do break through, there won't be enough damage and people will just be like, oh, this is weak. And then, Israel might restrain themselves on how many interceptors they begin using. But if a couple break through and they're strong enough and the impacts and they've been pretty devastating, Israel's going to ramp up its interceptors, concerned about the strength of these rockets. Then once Israel depletes the majority of its rockets, Iran will launch a full salvo of high-yield mid-range ballistic missiles to actually start causing massive damage in urban areas. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, to my mind, the burden of proof should be on those who want U.S. military intervention in some form or fashion. I think there's a reasonable chain of events that would lead to even a limited strike of a bunker buster, let's say, or 2 bunker busters, precipitating a broader engagement because Iran would, I think, necessarily retaliate, and the United States would necessarily retaliate in the event that Americans are killed or American assets are threatened. And then you have a path towards regime change, whether or not the United States wanted to march down that path in the first place. There is, and to my mind, that's why I don't find the helpful distinction between, this chain of, oh, well, we should support Israel because it's their fight. Oh, well, let's help them with limited strikes. And now it is
not their fight. Wait, what? No, are you kidding? Like,
is it not Israel's fight?
Well, of course, but are you saying it's not America's fight?
Why is it America's fight?
Factually, it's not our fight right now.
I would disagree with that.
We are not participating.
Why would you disagree?
Well, because as the IRGC has stated many times, death to America has not merely been a slogan or a chant, but a governing doctrine that since 1979, we have seen them carry out from the first moment that they took our hostages, they took our diplomats and our Marines hostages for 444 days, and the IRGC bragged about it. Then going to the 80s with the 241 servicemen that they killed in the Beirut barracks bombing. The year after that, when they mutilated and tortured CIA station chief William Buckley, not the national guy, and then William Higgins,
they're not the good
and then
guys.
Okay, but that's just scratching the surface. Then let's go. That's just what they've done to us in the region, in the Middle East. Then let's go to the Western Hemisphere and look at what they've been doing in Latin America. Look at them sending UAVs to Venezuela. Look at the reports that they've been trying to dig underground tunnels from Mexico into the United States, like they did in Syria and Lebanon and Gaza. Look at the fact that they have dozens, if not hundreds, of sleeper cells here in America, which if you read like Todd Bensman's work or listen to him, he has documented this extensively. There's nobody who's done better field work on this than Todd Bensman. And the fact that they essentially have been wreaking havoc on the region of Latin America strictly so that they can position themselves in a region that they know they have turned hostile to the United States. I mean, there's a reason why they're working with the Mexican drug cartels and the Colombian drug cartels.
If that threat is as existential and absolute as you present, then I think it begs returning to the original question of if regime change should be the goal of America. That's why I find it almost a bit disingenuous to say there is such an option as a limited strike, because you just went through decades of evidence that paints Iran, even though you said they're a paper tiger, as a nation that could supposedly threaten the continental United States.
So let me clarify.
And so to me, it's like, which is Iran this paper tiger that we must confront in order to preserve the interests of the American people? Or are they a paper tiger that we can handle with a few bunker busters and the Israelis doing the rest?
Sure. Okay. Well, two things. Instead of presuming what my views are, feel free to ask. But second of all, what I mean by Iran as a paper tiger is precisely what makes them such a threat in these realms that I said. They're not going to be necessarily as big, I don't believe, but I could be wrong, a military threat because of, like I said, their past actions and the fact that I don't believe that they have the military capacity to essentially go up against the United States. But that is precisely why they use proxies. That is precisely why they are trying to essentially co-opt other governments and regimes and brainwash them and support them so that they can do Iran's dirty work, because Iran does not have the capacity to do it by themselves.
I honestly don't know which governments they're co-opting. I'm sure they're subversive.
Bolivia.
Yeah.
Chile,
so let's confront the co-option
Cuba.
of the Bolivian government. Let's.
I agree. We got to invade China. China's doing that tenfold.
Well, there's no limiting principle to this theory, right? Because North Korea has been talking about wiping off America from the face of the earth for many decades. Mm-hmm. And they also have nuclear weapons now, a few dozen perhaps.
There's a big difference, and nobody wants to say it.
China's got nukes.
There's a big difference
why we
between
don't invade?
China and North Korea and Iran. Do you know what it is? It's one word.
Islam, perhaps?
There you go.
But
So communism is not a concern, or like
Communism, as evil as it is, they're atheists, man. They have some sort of sobering idea that makes them understand the risks that their country is going to get nuked to hell. Why do you think the why do you think that, mutually assured destruction worked in the Cold War? It was because the Soviet Union understood the actual implications of a nuclear world. Iran these people are, this is the thing that this is actually really the thing that the non-interventionists don't want to really dig into. And I would love to have that conversation with them, because
so given this threat,
real quick,
component, the fact that this regime is a Shiite supremacist, they are fanatical.
You're saying that Iran is not a rational actor. That's the phrase I believe that defines. We define countries as rational actors. Or this was a Mike Duran was talking to us. That when we do threat assessment, we say, is this nation a rational actor? Meaning, would they fear being wiped off the map? And the argument is that Iran could go either way.
100%. That is what I'm saying.
So
because Iran actually really is trying to resurrect the 600 AD battle of Karbala or whatever it's called, right? To essentially usher in the 12th Shia Imam or whatever. This is part of their entire political revolutionary doctrine. You cannot separate the religious fundamentalism from any of their political or military decisions. You just can't.
So then what is it worth for America to end this threat? If this threat that you just laid out exists, what is the cost that Americans should be willing to pay to eliminate the threat?
The cost in terms of money, or the cost in terms
of
all
of it,
servicemen or
blood and treasure,
civilians?
blood treasure,
have to be,
bandwidth.
I mean,
what should we do? If this threat is so all-consuming,
okay, what should we do? Depends on what happens in the next 4 days. Now, I can tell you possible things that could happen, and then I could tell you what I think we should do if each of those things happen.
So
I don't have do I think, you said at the beginning of this conversation, does anybody want America to nuke Iran? Of course I don't want America to nuke Iran. But look, if people want to call me a war hawk or a warmonger or a neocon, go right ahead. But I do not have any problem saying that depending on how the situation escalates, that I would not take that off of the table.
Nuking Iran.
Yeah. I wouldn't.
I mean,
take it off
to
the
be
table.
fair, I mean, the option of nuking anybody is always on the table, and that's why I think Trump denied it. I think the probability of Trump nuking Iran is 0%. But you'd be insane to be like, we will never nuke anybody, no matter what. That's dumb. If Iran actually said, you know what, we've already enriched uranium, we've got dirty bombs, we're dispatching them, and nuclear war is now, the U.S. is going to retaliate and say, okay, then we're taking out Fordo right now by whatever means necessary. And I think even Tucker was saying that if they are actively trying to kill Trump, then he would be in favor of bombing the hell out of their country.
I know, Farhad Shakari doesn't exist.
Yeah, I did find it funny that Iran has publicly stated they want to kill Trump.
Well, not only that, there have been at least 3 indictments. The guy who ordered the first of all,
that was based off of a phone interview with a guy who is in Iran.
Shakari, who's in Iran, who used to be in our prisons, who was in American prisons.
Right, but he's in Iran. He's not.
Now he's in Iran.
And we don't. He told us that the IRGC told him to go kill Trump.
Well, not just Trump, other people as well.
Right, but there's not. And that's a bad thing.
And he was the second.
And
he was the second. He was the second person that they linked to an assassination attempt on Trump. And I mean, it's so ridiculous that this is considered a hypothetical to me. I mean, this is so, because if you look at,
but I think to Tim's point,
at what the IRGC has done in the rest of the world, look at what they've done in the UK. Look at, I mean, their assassination attempts and espionage.
What have they done in the UK?
This is part and parcel. Oh my God, Iran is the way that Iran has infiltrated the UK and has made has I mean, you can even look at like David Lammy's like recent comments on them. They are a like level 4 like emergency threat in terms of how they are trying to destroy that country from within.
Well, but okay, if you remove the IRGC and all of their influence from the UK would still have a lot of problems from third world migration.
100%.
I think, but we need to return to the original question. And this is why I'm not necessarily convinced by the arguments to warrant the United States taking military action to help Israel. Because if it's true that all they need is a few bombs dropped on Fordo, but that this threat is so vast and multidimensional, then that's the least we should do, and that's also irrelevant to this threat, this extensive threat. So then, but then I think, to be honest,
I'd love to respond to that.
Well, look, can I show this real quick? This is from Iran International, 2023. IRGC commando repeats threat to kill Trump and Pompeo. I remember this story. It was really big after the killing of Soleimani. Iran was like, "We will get revenge. We will kill Trump." I thought this was fairly common. They say that Amirali Hajizadeh, the head of the Revolutionary Guard's aerospace force, spoke of Iran's often repeated threat to avenge the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Tehran's top military intelligence operator in the Middle East, saying, "We are looking." He went on to give a threat that he wanted to kill Trump. And then you just pull up this guy's Wikipedia page, and he died on the 13th.
You know
he was
how?
killed in those strikes.
You know how? Yeah, he was killed. Yeah.
Israeli airstrike in June of 2025. Yeah. So I thought this was, this is not a statement of what the U.S. should or should not do, but the argument that Iran's top officials were like, "We will have revenge for the killing of Soleimani," I thought was fairly common knowledge.
And I really think that if you take Islam out of the equation, then we would be having an entirely different conversation. And I think that's the conversation that I see most people having. And
so, Karys, are you willing to accept a diplomatic solution to this conflict that leaves Khomeini in charge of the country?
100%. However, I believe that if that diplomatic solution allows for any sort of future, like in 20 years, if Iran can develop another bomb, which is a very real possibility with a diplomatic solution.
What do you mean another bomb?
Then we're just going to do it. If they are able to enrich uranium to 60% purity, at the 90% threshold for weapons grade material, and have 400 kilograms of uranium again, then to me, I think that just shows that we were naive. However, if that doesn't happen, then yes, a diplomatic solution is 100% the right way to go. It just depends how much you are prepared to verify and to essentially keep your guard up. But I want to just address a point you made about before, which is a really good point, that if they're already such a threat, like you were saying, I can't even remember the point you were making, but in response, I wanted to say that
if Iran is such a threat, then it doesn't make sense to make a deal or to do limited airstrikes.
Right.
It makes sense to do whatever it takes to nuke them or to facilitate a regime change.
That's exactly why I think that should also be on the table. I think that all those solutions should be on the table. Look, if Iran actually surrenders, not is ready to negotiate, not is ready to, pause their nuclear program and shut the doors.
What do you mean by surrender?
The actual surrender. Give up their thousands of centrifuges, okay? Destroy them. Destroy their centrifuge. What?
How would you know if they did?
Well, it would have to be overseen by the IAEA or.
So you're saying like foreign security forces in some capacity would need to physically enter Iran and then oversee the actions that they're taking.
Yeah, that's what the IAEA does.
What if they have secret facilities no one knows about?
Well, that's a very real possibility, and that's why they essentially need to have a level of transparency that, to me, is very, very, very difficult to get, which makes the diplomatic solution very difficult to achieve. They might have centrifuges in other places, but I mean, we know that the whole reason that Fordo is 300 feet underground is precisely because it was covert and it was in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which the IA
and because
found
they don't want to get bombed by
they wanted to specifically
PB-57s.
Exactly. It was literally because they knew about bunker busters, and they said we have to build it in such a way that the U.S. cannot do anything about it.
We destroyed Iraq's nuclear facilities in 1991 because they were above ground, which was the impetus for them to build Fordo 300 feet under the earth.
Yeah, exactly. There was a deep investigation into their nuclear program. Of course, they would want to do it in secret because they want to have a nuclear bomb.
What's the threat of Iran having a nuclear bomb?
The threat to the world, the threat to America, the threat to Israel. I mean, well, first of all, talk about like.
I don't care about the world. I only care about Israel.
If we're talking about like, blood and treasure, right, and the cost that a nuclear Iran would, like the actual dollar cost of a nuclear Iran on America, it is, I mean, I haven't done the calculations.
But why? Like, what's going to happen?
Maritime routes, transcontinental infrastructure. You try to get insurance. You try to get insurance and risk models after there is a nuclear Iran in the region. Are you kidding me?
But why? What are you saying they're going to do?
Because first of all, there's going to be an arms race. I mean, they've said it. Saudi Arabia has said it.
Pakistan's
the UAE has said it. I understand, but so this increases the cost of things like insurance and the region, right? When you create risk models, right, for activities in the region.
I just gotta say, are you saying Iran is going to nuke people?
Oh, well, 100%. Well, you just said, are they going to? You said you didn't care about Israel, so I
said I don't care about the world. I only care about Israel. That was a joke.
Oh, I thought you said I don't care about Israel.
No, he said he only cares about Israel.
I mean, do I believe they're going to nuke Israel? 100%. But look, I'm trying to.
That's the question, because everybody.
Do I believe that? I believe 100% they will, because I believe when somebody says they want to kill you. Look at like North Korea. Like this is a perfect example. Okay, does North Korea have nuclear weapons? Of course they do. Is North Korea an ally of Iran and an enemy of America and an ally of China and Venezuela and all of those rogue states? Yes, of course. But again, North Korea, it does not have an annihilationist, expansionist goal that Iran has. North Korea wants America destroyed.
You don't think North Korea wants to own the entire Korean Peninsula?
I think they want to own the peninsula. I think that's as far as it goes.
Well, so then why haven't
if you have regional ambitions, you also have to know your own capability, right? And so we can kind of trust North Korea to know that. But because Iran has all of these proxies, and because that's coupled with these dogmatic, religiously fundamentalist ambitions, they actually believe that they can carry out a complete restructuring of not just the region, but the entire world. I mean, we're talking about, over a billion Muslims, and even if like 10% of that are a group that is sympathetic to any sort of like Islamist way of life.
Can you be a little bit more? I understand.
You're talking about more than the population of America here.
I think Iran
out over the world.
is an adversary, and I don't think they are some people that we should coddle. But to say that, letting. And I also don't think Iran should have a nuclear weapon. I don't think that's a good thing to hope for or to allow. But I think we should be realistic and concrete about the details in the actions that would be required to stop such a future. In my mind, there are two options to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. One is diplomacy and a deal. There was good reporting before the war started that Iran was willing to accept American investigators on the ground, which was something that President Obama didn't secure. So a deal that allows some sort of verification of their nuclear regime, all the caveats about how difficult that might be apply, or it is an all-out ground invasion that necessitates a change from the regime that you expertly point out is threatening America across the world.
Right. So you're saying war or appeasement. There's nothing in between.
I said diplomacy, a diplomatic solution.
But you know, I mean, don't be naive. I know you're not naive. You know that all Iran knows how to do is to cheat and to steal.
Was there any intelligence assessment around the world that said that they had a nuclear weapon before Israel started their airstrikes?
You mean like in 2003 when the IAEA came out with their huge report and discovered that like since like 1980 or since like the 1980s at some point, Iran had a completely covert like secret nuclear weapons program and was in complete violation of the treaty that they had signed on to?
Of course. And so I think a way to end that is a diplomatic solution that provides genuine transparency, right? Maybe we literally watch them cement close the doors to Fordo.
I don't think that's possible.
But they said Iran.
Then we got to go to war.
But the Ayatollah. Okay, there you just said it because the Ayatollahs said over and over again. If you read the news, they said we are not going to submit to Trump's terms for this deal. The term Trump has his head on his shoulders. He understands exactly what Iran would need to do in order for them not to be a nuclear threat to America. But those things that need to happen, Iran will not agree to. They said it over and over again. So what's wrong with Trump saying to Iran, okay, you have 60 days to try to make a deal. Mm-hmm. And if you do not come up with a diplomatic solution that essentially satisfies our requirements, then all bets are off.
I'm pretty sure that if we invade, we'll be greeted as liberators.
This is I think underlies a point about the debate. We're told that there is this limited option where we can take some precise action against a regime that is also a paper tiger and an existential threat to humanity at the same time, and then somehow avoid further entanglement, further military action. And that is, again, I think when I say it's not being honest, I'm not saying deliberately a deliberate lie, but I think it leaves unsaid and undiscussed the real eventualities of what happens when we think that we can take quick, decisive military action in the Middle East to achieve policy outcomes that are actually a lot more slippery than we care to admit.
I think what's happening is actually pretty obvious. The United States, for a long time now, would do whatever it takes to remove the Iranian government, and they want regime change. The problem, you got about 90 million people there, and many of them have deeply fundamentalist Islamist worldview that is actually kept in check by the current regime. Meaning, if you remove the existing government right now, you have 10 million people maybe who are willing to do, I'll put it this way, probably one of the biggest civil wars we've seen in hundreds of years, if not ever, because population expansion. And then you're going to have these people spreading out into various other regions, and you may end up with the biggest ISIS problem we've ever seen.
I think
but this is the U.S. government assessment, basically, that they want the Ayatollah to heal. They want to bring him to heel so he keeps all of those extremist forces in check, but also isn't developing a nuke.
It's also the assessment of Saudi Arabia,
right?
Bahrain,
yeah. But
the Sunni Muslim world,
and I understand. But I think the analogy that three things. First of all, I just have to say, I explained why I called them a paper tiger and why they are also a threat. And doesn't that make sense? Doesn't it make sense to say that their military capabilities on their own cannot overpower America's or Israel, but they work around the world through their proxies?
If they are a threat to us asymmetrically in Bolivia, then we should confront them asymmetrically in Bolivia. It doesn't make any sense to confront them with conventional military action in Iran.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
We should defeat the threat.
I see what you're saying. They are a threat on multiple levels here. So without a nuclear weapon, they are our number one immediate national security threat. I mean, long-term threat, China, 100%. China,
I completely disagree.
100%. But in terms of the immediate national security threat, I believe Iran is number one. Okay, it's fine. Even if you don't think it's
probably
number
before
one.
Iran.
What?
The Qatars are probably the cartels are way above Iran.
Well, Iran's working with the cartels, but in terms,
So the cartels are a bigger threat to our national security.
No. Tim, I was talking about sovereign nations here. I was talking about sovereign nations. Of course, the cartels are a threat.
Yeah, but we
they're
allocate national.
a more immediate threat to
They're
us.
a threat to our interests
doubt.
in the Middle East.
Okay, but I'm talking about in terms of sovereign nations. To me,
Right.
Iran's
threat is to
the most immediate
U.S. assets in the Middle East.
No, I
contiguous
just explained.
United States.
I just explained what they're doing in the Western Hemisphere and what they're doing even in our own soil. And we're looking at this screen right now that says that they are trying to kill, Trump and
Well, this was a threat to kill him.
So-
and I do think they're trying. I think it's silly. Like, of course they want to kill Trump.
Okay, so it's not just in the Middle
Killed
East.
Soleimani. I mean, that was.
It's not just in the Middle East.
Does
It's not
Iran
just our
own any-
assets in the Middle
The
East.
principal threat we face from Iran is in the Middle East. Like, obviously, we can say that the biggest threat China poses is the South China Sea and the trade agreements and the alliances we have with the Commonwealth nations and Taiwan, et cetera, et cetera. But they engage in cyber attacks on us as well. Obviously, Iranian.
They also own millions of acres of American land.
Oh, believe me,
China.
look, I work
Yeah.
for the Epoch Times. I understand the Chinese communist threat to America, and that's why I said long-term threat, no doubt.
The real
it's
threat
China.
that I don't. The reason why I asked about whether they're going to nuke us is because for some reason, and I don't know why, nobody says it. I keep hearing about, even Trump has been saying for 40 years they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And I'm like, are you saying they will nuke us? And everybody always dances around that question because I'm like, is the answer yes or no? I think
Yes.
the bigger question is, the bigger risk is that Iran's going to give a bunch of crackpot Islamist lunatic rebel groups low yield nuclear bombs, tactical like dirty bombs and suitcase nukes,
100%.
and then you're going to see like cities irradiated.
100%, Tim. You are going to see, if Iran gets a bomb, you are essentially going to see the first ever
It's not a bomb.
nuclear equipped
Fissile material.
insurgency. Like you
Right.
will see insurgent, like ideologically,
The real concern I have is like the Houthi rebels launching nuclear artillery, low yield stuff, but just vaporizing a tanker in the Red Sea and then threatening the globe, like the world with, we have 10 more of these and we're not telling you where they are. And then what do we do? Does Tom Cruise have to come in and hunt them down? I mean, I'm not advocating for war. I'm saying this is
for sure.
This is the
And
real
I think,
concern that needs to be
look,
brought up.
and if you're saying the number one threat is in the Middle East, then yes, I agree with you. It's more, but I'm just saying that we have to consider what they're also doing in the rest of the world.
I'm just
in
wondering
Europe
why-
and in the Western Hemisphere. And I would also point out that this idea that okay, because Will, you're saying essentially the choices are a diplomatic solution or like an all-out ground invasion. But why does that?
Whatever military action it takes to facilitate
But why
regime change.
Okay, so
Which I think
or
is a ground
destroying
invasion.
the nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and I guess I don't buy that you perhaps would accept a future where Iran continues all of these adversarial actions around the world,
Right.
just without a nuclear program at home.
Right. Would I accept that?
Would you accept that? Would you accept them working with the cartels in Bolivia and infiltrating the UK? Just so, right? Like there would still be a threat.
No, I think we should
Exactly, we should continue.
confront them, like you said, asymmetrically.
Until when?
And until essentially America and Israel and their new Gulf allies have essentially taken out all of these proxy groups, and the maximum campaign of sanctions have essentially rid Iran of their economic of their economic capabilities to fund these groups, and they essentially they're forced to focus primarily on their own people.
Yeah, I get that. I think that starting down this path of U.S. military action necessitates a world where we are involved in a regime change in Iran.
But why? Because look at the past. Like, look at what. Not everything has to be. Not everything is Iraq. Okay,
Can
I
explain why? Can I explain why? Because
why
it would happen?
Trump. But what about Trump taking out? What about Trump spending 2 years taking out ISIS? Boom, done. What about Trump spending 3 years taking out Al Shabaab in Somalia? Boom.
You
done.
know what?
What about Trump in North Korea?
Yeah, if I
what
could.
about? You know what I mean? Like, these are one and done things. Why does everything have to why does your brain go to 100%?
So
and there's examples of Trump being of actually being successful at taking military action that does not result in like forever wars or boots on the ground.
The fight against ISIS did involve boots on the ground.
That's true. ISIS did. Yes.
Americans, myself included, Kurds,
Okay.
tons of thousands of Kurds. Where Soleimani was killed in Baghdad, Iraq.
What I'm saying is that we carried out a strike. We took military action, and that was a one and done thing. I'm just saying not every military action means that it's going to end in boots on the ground or a forever war hundreds of American casualties.
I just want to draw the parameters here. Is your position no military intervention? The U.S. should stay out of it?
I think my position is the status quo with a credible threat of U.S. military action in order to facilitate a better deal that provides a more permanent end to the Iranian nuclear program becoming a weapons program.
But you are then saying you are then saying that there is a possibility of U.S. military intervention. So to what scale, depending on the threat, would you tolerate U.S. military intervention? Like, what I mean by that is, if the Ayatollah goes on TV, literally holding a red button with a giant nuke behind him saying, we're going to launch this, would you then propose a military, like a full regime change?
If we have a credible threat that Iran is about to launch a nuclear weapon at America or at Israel, then of course it necessitates a just preemptive action.
Like actual, I'm saying, is there a scenario, and it's silly to say, got a button, but is there a scenario in your mind where we have to send U.S. troops into Iran?
Well, so this is my point. If Iran killed U.S. soldiers, certainly at scale, as they already have, but in an exchange of conventional military firepower, then the United States would be justified in invading Iran.
I think,
but the way to avoid that is to stay out of offensive military action against the regime right now.
Real quick, there's one scenario where I think literally 95% of people in this country agree that we would send boots on the ground into Iran, and that is the assassination of Donald Trump by the Iranians. I've even talked to anti-interventionist libertarians who agreed if a foreign nation kills your president, there's no question, it's an obligation to respond. Your nation doesn't exist if your leaders are killed by your enemies. So I think most people, when we have this conversation of intervention or not, we're really just talking about the threshold of threat. At what point do we deem the threat to have exceeded the red line to which we have to go in? And I think what we're really seeing is the anti-intervention voices think that line is very, very far away. And then many people think we're at that line, that if Iran gets fissile material, then the line is then it's too late. So the line is now that they're so close to having it.
Well, and also like a nation like Israel,
I want to talk about how close they actually are, though.
America can afford to take a lot more risks with Iran than like a nation of Israel can. So it also just depends. It also just depends, where we are in the world and how we're looking at it. So
I don't describe myself as
thank you for your service.
I don't describe myself as an anti-interventionist. I think the United States should take military action when it is necessary to preserve the interests of the American people and our nation, our borders. To say that it's anti-interventionist or not is, I think, a little bit of a way to misframe the debate.
I definitely don't think you're an anti-interventionist. I've seen you on Fox.
Well, I am more restrained than most, I hope.
Yes,
but
I would classify you as someone who urges for foreign restraint.
I do think that there are extremes on the issue, and the anti-interventionist voices have more prominent extreme personalities.
So utopian.
Than the pro-intervention. Typically, like even Mark Levin, who is probably one of the most pro-intervention, is, if I were to scale things at like a -10 to +10, and the +10 people are like, go in, boots on the ground, take over, remove the Ayatollah. And the anti-interventionists are like, we should never be involved no matter what. You're insane, minus 10. I think that the prominent voices we see that are anti-intervention skew closer to the extreme than the pro-intervention forces. It's not a moral judgment. I'm saying the pro-intervention individuals know they have a hard sell to make. And so they're trying to come across as more reserved and more reluctant to actually engage in conflict.
But do you think that is a fact of their messaging or of their actual vision?
I think it's PR. Their actual vision is like Bolton when he said, next year we'll be celebrating in Tehran.
Right.
Publicly, they know that if they come out and they say, we're going to send boots on the ground, tens of thousands of Americans will die, and we will raise an American flag over their capital city. If you say that, you're going to lose the PR battle instantly.
Well, but like I'm somebody who, I don't think that's always true. I mean, maybe there are some of these people that are more reserved and secretly are war hawks or warmongers, but I think a lot of these people who support President Trump just really believe in a peace through strength agenda and really do think that Iran is a credible national security threat.
Trump's doing it all right. I'm very impressed.
I'm very impressed too.
He met with Bannon and called Tucker on the phone. Or I think Tucker called him. And Tucker apologized, but a private meeting with Steve Bannon shows that Trump is actually listening to the people. He's listening to his advisors. He does pay attention, and I'm hoping that.
I don't know if meeting with Steve Bannon means that he's listening. I mean, Steve Bannon has a very, I don't know. Don't get me
I absolutely look.
He's
but I
perceptive.
agree with you on track. Look, but you know the poll. You've seen what all the polls say about this, right? About what how the American people feel about this.
So depending on the question, there's sentiment against striking Iran, but sentiment in favor of stopping them from getting a nuke, which is like, what does it mean?
I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, and 83% of Americans wanted us to invade Iraq. And then in 2 years, less than 2 years, it was a completely toxic political position.
Well, look, we get what we deserve, right? We get what we vote for, and it is the will of the people. So even if we are stupid and we believe, in the government taking certain actions that end up, shooting us in the foot, like, I'm sorry, that's our right. That's how the world works. That's how it should go. We can't be shielded from death and making mistakes if it's the will of the people, right? And I think that
sure we can. we don't govern by referendum. So I mean, it doesn't need to.
Okay,
my point is, it
yes,
doesn't need to dictate
republic.
foreign
We don't
policy.
have like mob rule. But what I'm saying is, if an overwhelming amount of people are supporting a certain action, like on the foreign policy, like international stage, then I don't think that without good reason, they're like a small group of people then should be like, oh no, all of you people are wrong.
Yeah, but it's clear right now that there is not overwhelming support for U.S. military intervention.
I don't know. I mean, look at the Punch poll, the CNN poll, the JL Partners poll. None of these. I mean, well, maybe Punch poll
I think
does,
the one
but
consensus.
CNN and JL Partners, they don't use YouGov. Rasmussen doesn't use YouGov, and JL Partners found that 65% of MAGA Republicans, more than the conventional Republicans, which they found were 50%, were in favor of U.S. strikes. Now, would they be in favor of a ground invasion? Maybe not. Maybe that would be the red line. But they did find that 65% would support President Trump in a strike.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag.
Steve Bannon said, if Trump decides to join the war, MAGA will get on board. That's a bold statement. I think you lose permanently 20% of MAGA for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of Trump supporters will grumble and be like, I can only trust my president or something like that.
Well, because Trump's record is incredible. I mean, he really has an impeccable record of, like I said, taking military action, but not leading us into disastrous consequences.
Can I just choose to believe the poll that represents my worldview, though, and ignore all the rest? Because YouGov says, no, people don't want military action. And so as long as my political position is aligned with one poll, I'll ignore all the other ones.
Yeah, but that's why I was saying YouGov is like there's a lot of problematic.
I agree.
YouGov is not.
YouGov is, yeah.
But look at the JL Partners poll, look at the Punch poll, look at the CNN poll. Maybe Punch poll uses YouGov, I'm not sure, but I know that CNN doesn't. I know that JL Partners doesn't. And Rasmussen, look at the Rasmussen poll from May. They don't use YouGov.
I don't want to say I don't care.
But my point is that they're all similar. They're all saying the same thing. That's my point.
The issue is that the questions are asked.
It's not that split. It's not that split as people want to say. The majority of Americans do support President Trump and MAGA. They don't want Iran. The majority of Americans do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They understand Iran is a nuclear Iran would be an even bigger national security threat to America than they already are. And some of that population, depending on the poll, would support military action in the form of strikes. I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any polling about a ground invasion. I haven't looked.
You know what's really funny too is just sort of as an aside. There's a lot of anger at Trump. Even Tucker Carlson said Trump is complicit in this war. Trump hasn't done anything yet. Well, it's the commentary online right now is
I know,
it's
he
as
just
if
unleashed Netanyahu. He let. I mean.
Well, it depends on what you read because there's contradictory reports where either Trump did know or didn't know, was involved or wasn't.
Of course he knew. This was the most brilliant deception plan. I mean, it was absolute. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Anybody who thinks that Netanyahu did not coordinate with America does not understand anything about the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump. And I'm sorry, Netanyahu is Trump's bitch. I'm just gonna say it. For all, like, you know how the media painted in a ridiculous image of President Trump, right? Through like Russiagate and all of the lies about him that just bared no reality to the person he was, right? He's a fascist, he's a dictator, all this kind of stuff. That's exactly what Western media does with Netanyahu. I don't like Netanyahu at all. So I'm not saying like, this is not like, I'm not cheerleading for Netanyahu. But the way that the media portrays him and the way that conservatives have even fallen for some of the media's lies about him is hysterical. Netanyahu is not a hawk. He is a pussy. He is a bitch. And he essentially has the
anti-Israel people don't know whether to cheer or get angry because they want to believe Israel controls America.
I know, of course. Well, that's the thing is this is all binaries. It's war or appeasement. It's the Iraq war but the thing is, like, what's different? Look, all of these conservatives that are now saying we should make a deal. Like, let me ask you, Will, Trump ran on the idea that the JCPOA in 2015 was an absolute disaster. So if Iran is not agreeing to these new terms, these more hardline terms that Trump is giving them, then how could a deal be possible?
Because there was real evidence and reporting that they had agreed to some terms that would have made a more stringent deal before Israel started their campaign of airstrikes.
I didn't hear that. What I heard is that the Ayatollah had.
So maybe I could just go on a little bit. Okay. So there is a world where, for example, Iran accepts an inspection regime that includes American inspectors, a key oversight of the JCPOA, and something that I think would go a long way towards visibility into a future nuclear program. And hey, there's even a world where the Israeli military campaign is a really effective means of getting an even better deal. And that's what I think we need to talk about is what does Israel do from here? It's pretty clear that they cannot achieve the outcome of ending the nuclear program militarily by themselves. I think that's true. And so perhaps this is the time, if it's true what there is reported about Israel's air defense stocks, if it's true that they can't destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, then I think a great outcome for Israel is to use this kind of zenith of pressure to back Iran into a corner where they have to accept a good deal. That to me is, I don't know, but I imagine can be an organizing principle of U.S. diplomatic policy here and foreign policy, because again, the future is one where Israel either starts to risk their own population and their own defense and civilian infrastructure, or again, it's even further escalation. That's why I think this weekend is so key. These 2 weeks Trump has given us is so key, because it's the chance for Israel's military action to produce the best possible outcome, which is a better deal for Israel and the United States. And that otherwise we get to the point where we run out of steam. Israel runs out of steam in some ways, defensively and offensively, and this starts to get really bad, whether we can control it or not. I don't know what you think about that. But again, we have to be real about what defensive interceptors look like.
It just sounds like to me that like the evidence and the reporting that comes out that kind of fits your kind of preconceived assessment about this, and the evidence and reporting that comes out on a day-to-day basis that fits my already previous assessments are perhaps different. It's like we're looking at different evidence. I'm looking at evidence. I'm looking, I'm in like WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups with like, with Iranians and IDF people, that are sending real-time stuff that are saying different things to me than what your groups are telling you about whether Iranians are, about whether the Ayatollahs are prepared to actually give up their nuclear weapons program in a real way for this deal.
Yeah, there was some social media reporting that there was an Iranian plane that flew to Oman with a delegation on Tuesday.
I think 3 planes.
Well, sure. And so there is always going to be bluster from the regime, from the Ayatollah. There's always going to be the chance of death to America. But I think you have to look at the actions of the government. Frankly, there's a world in which they could have already escalated this if they really hated America so much and if they really wanted to cling to their nuclear regime to the death. If I'm just putting myself in their shoes and I wanted a nuclear program.
But they have certain ambitions that they are always weighing, right? So like, of course they want to destroy America. Of course they want to take down the West, right? But they are trying to do this in multiple ways in different geopolitical theaters of war around the world. So if they believe that, dropping a nuclear bomb is going to offset some other things that they're trying to do, like everything's like in that sense, they are rational because they're essentially juggling all their different methods of ambitions for global domination, and they're trying to figure out what is the best way to achieve that on any given day.
I agree with you, but that's why if the United States gets militarily involved, all bets are off for them because they know that they're in a world where they're not just fighting the IDF, they're fighting the American military.
Right.
That requires a complete escalation of violence. We'll probably see the whole nature of their air defense assets. That's my concern with the news about what these bunker busters would or would not do. It seems to me that it would be reasonable for Iran to preserve some of their most sophisticated air defense assets, especially around their military sites. And so what it would look like, even let's say we're not going to drop a tactical nuclear weapon, but even if we're going to drop 3 or 4 bunker busters, which is probably what it would take, that's also 10% of our supply. It would require probably a half dozen other U.S. aircraft to go in before the B-2s with the bunker busters, expose themselves to air defense capability. That's tankers, 40,000 feet overhead.
That's what Israel's already done.
Controlling the skies.
And so that assumes knowledge. It assumes that the Iranians are showing us all their cards right now. And I think there has to be a degree of humility over the fact that we don't yet know the full extent of what's left in the Iranian arsenal.
It's like when Goku is fighting someone, he doesn't go Super Saiyan right away.
Yeah, I don't necessarily grasp that analogy, but but I
for the nerds.
I think we're on the same page.
Basically, Iran is holding back, waiting because I actually think the U.S. understands this. Israel's going to go in. Iran's known for their air defense, and it's mountainous, which makes it very difficult for the U.S. to come and just flatten. Iran knows they're not going to penetrate Israeli interceptors with U.S. support. So the assumption is they're holding back their higher yield warheads until they feel that they're going to start breaking through the interceptors. Additionally, they're going to keep air defense hidden and secure and not use it, so it will not be targeted because they know the U.S. will try and come with bunker busters. So I think it's fair to assume, and I think probably the U.S. has already assessed this, when they do go in with bombers, new Iranian air defense is going to pop up they did not know was there, and rockets will be firing at our jets.
I think it's a possibility, but if we're prepared to, doubt Iran's capability, like I'm also doubting these headlines that say that the Pentagon has briefed Trump that, and said that these 30,000 bunker busting bombs are not actually going to work, and that it would require some sort of boots on the ground commando raid. A lot of news like this has come out in the last few months. A lot of stuff that's been leaked to anonymous sources, and then Trump will send out a tweet and he'll just be like, fake news, So I'm just I'm skeptical of that analysis too, especially when this has been the scenario that has been mapped out for, over a decade, of possibly using, these big bombs to get to Fordo. And I don't think it's necessarily true. Look, it's also true that Israel might be able to do this themselves with their 5,000-pound bombs. Okay? So we have to be skeptical about all of this. And this is why I said at the very beginning that what I think America should do completely depends on how this develops on a day-to-day basis and what Israel is discovering and how their operation is progressing, how we see the momentum of the people on the ground in Iran shaping up. I think all of these factors are so important before we say what America should or should not do. We need to be able to have multiple scenarios in our heads that play out and come up with solutions for every single one of those scenarios.
I disagree with that only because if we were convinced that this was a reasonable an operation with a reasonable chance of success and a necessary one, I think we had to have done it this week. Because and that's why I frankly
Which one? The 30,000 pound.
Yeah, dropping bombs to destroy Fordo. Who knows what other contingencies can be put in place? That's why I'm a little bit more hopeful. I think that once we get past this weekend, I'll be a little bit more hopeful for chances for a diplomatic solution. Because the decisive military action is about momentum and massing firepower before the adversary can react to it or plan for it.
I think that the reason these moves are being made now has less to do with enriched uranium and more to do with, I think this will be the last period, based on current trends, in which the U.S. supports Israel. I think within 10 years, you're going to start seeing more and more calls to defund U.S. aid to Israel. And I think within 20 years, we probably cut off Israel entirely, based on the trends in polling and sentiment towards Israel.
Okay.
With the boomers largely being the support base for U.S. involvement with Israel, I think as they start dying, getting older, and exiting exiting the economy, be it political or otherwise, you're going to get Gen Z politicians, and if they're on the right, they're going to say, "I don't know why we're funding this," and if they're on the left, they're going to say, "We hate Israel."
Okay.
The end result is the funding is cut off, and if this were 10 years from now and Israel started striking Iran, the U.S. would be like, "Leave us out of it, bye."
Okay, that's a whole different conversation that I am so happy to get into because you just said a lot of things that actually assume certain.
I'm not assuming anything.
I would say misconceptions about the relationship between.
I'm basing it off of the existing polls from Pew as of March.
No. I know. I'm not saying that your assumption about people not supporting Israel is incorrect. I'm saying your characterization of funding Israel and USAID actually
USAID.
And funding them through USAID and giving them aid and all that or whatever, and the memorandum. However, all the ways that we've given
Israel
money,
DoD gives them $2 billion
whether it's the
in military
DoD
equipment a year.
and the $3.8 billion package or USAID help, whatever it is, right? All the ways in which we fund and help Israel, to me, that do I believe that the younger generations are going to be fundamentally opposed to this? Sure, but that's only if the messaging stays the same, and if people still continue to believe that we are literally writing a blank check to Israel and they can do whatever they want, because that is a flat out lie.
And that's not
nobody
what I'm talking
understands. Nobody understands what this quote unquote aid actually does for America, and people calling it aid makes them believe that America isn't getting an extraordinary return.
Not material to what I'm saying. It's not material to what I'm saying, and let's just call it funding. The current sentiment, according to Pew, is minus 53. So 53% of Americans reportedly have an unfavorable view of Israel. I don't really care about whether that number is accurate. I care about the trends that Pew has tracked. I think trends are better, are easier to understand because they're using similar polling methodology, and using the similar methodology, they found a different result. That is, for U.S. adults aged 18 to 49 among Republicans or lean right, it went from 35 to 50% unfavorable. And among Democrats, it's 62 to 71. The younger generation is overwhelmingly shifting in that direction. Israel would not be able to launch an attack on Iran like this even 5 years from now.
I know, but what I'm saying to you, Tim, is that the relationship between Israel and America will change. It's already started to change since October 7th, so it won't matter. So I'm not saying that this isn't true. It could be true. But right now, what is happening is what October 7th showed Israel is that essentially the entire post Yom Kippur war decision to gut their, the most important units of their military and focus on, what they call a small and smart army and offload, so much manufacturing to America and depend on America for their, military needs might have been the biggest mistake that Israel has ever made in the history of its existence, and it is now trying to correct that. This gets into the whole IDF and the political class in Israel and the generals and whatever and all the whole can of worms. But I hope, and it seems like people are starting to wake up in Israel, that over time 100% they should decouple with America because it's an unhealthy, toxic, essentially the fact that America. We saw what happened with Biden. Biden was holding Israel hostage, one hand tied behind their back. They wouldn't let Israel do what they needed to do to win the war. And it ended up prolonging this Gaza war and dragging it out for way longer than it needed to be dragged, just because Biden knew that he was able to pull the strings because he was holding hostage necessary armaments that Israel needed for this war.
I have a question. Do you guys think that, let's say the U.S. had zero involvement with Israel, we weren't providing any funding in any capacity, and we only had very loose communications. Do you think the activists would protest the same over the Israel-Gaza war?
Oh, for sure.
I guess it's not because the U.S. is involved.
No. There's always another reason that they invent. Of course, it's the same stuff regurgitated. But
there's a reason why I brought this up because the follow up is why don't we have the same protests over the Uyghur Muslims in China?
Yeah, but look, Israel is damned if they do, damned if they don't. Look, you even saw this with the anti-interventionists, right? When right at the beginning, when Israel carried out this incredible, Michael Corleone, Sherlock Holmes 007 strike on the 12th, 13th. Immediately the response from people like Jack Posobiec and some Groypers and stuff like that were this is the ultimate betrayal of Netanyahu. And these are of President Trump. And these are the same people saying that we need to decouple and, Israel should just do their own thing. And America should, well, which is it? Do you want Israel to do their own thing, or do you want Israel to be coordinating with America? This is always, no matter what Israel does, because Israel is the collective Jew. Israel's just the collective Jew. Any classic trope that you apply, classic anti-Semitic trope that you apply to the anti-Semitic Jew has just been transferred in the modern age onto the state of Israel.
Do you think it would have been I don't know what's true in many ways, but do you think it would have been problematic, or it would be problematic, if we found out that Netanyahu launched this military operation knowing that Israel needed America to finish the job, and he did so without prior coordination with Trump?
Oh yeah, that would be problematic, but not if he did it with coordination.
Right. And so I think
if he did it,
I agree with you.
If he did it with no plan in place to carry this out without America's help.
Well, right. And so, he
didn't tell Trump. And that would be very problematic.
There's mixed reporting, right? There's mixed reporting.
Very problematic.
They obviously did this.
I'm the first to criticize Netanyahu for
Yeah, honestly, I didn't expect that. But there's plenty of reporting that indicates President Trump and the Americans asked Israel not to strike multiple times. There's negotiations scheduled for the Sunday, last Sunday, I suppose, right? Mm-hmm. And so my point is, like, if we want to perhaps abate this trend, because I think Tim is right that it's kind of a pivotal point for the Israel-U.S. relationship that I don't think you can just wish away on either side. And that's why diplomacy is important. These numbers will accelerate drastically if there is, I think, even a not necessarily that long protracted war in the Middle East, because Americans don't want that. They don't want military involvement in the Middle East, despite kind of the proximate issues.
And unfortunately, they've been brainwashed by the media for decades to believe that the relationship with Israel is one of the reasons why we're tied to the Middle East, when in actuality, Israel is America's biggest buffer in the Middle East that allows America to redirect resources to the Indo-Pacific, to China. Without Israel, America would have so many more expenditures. They would need to have even more boots on the ground that they do. Look, they don't have an air base and they don't have a base in Israel, right? They don't fight Israel's wars. Israel fights their own wars, but they have bases everywhere else. They still haven't gotten out of Germany since World War II.
I think you're right, and that's why the best case scenario is a world where Israel's decisive kind of surgical military action precipitates a better diplomatic solution that is more enduring than the JCPOA or the years without the JCPOA that saw runaway tensions. Because then that's a world where Israel shows that they don't need direct U.S. military involvement to achieve some of their strategic military outcomes. And it's also a world where the United States doesn't need to be more militarily involved in the Middle East after 30 years of boots on the ground.
I have a question. If hypothetically, say Donald Trump could snap his fingers and erase the existing regime of Iran and their insurgent proxies in the region, should he do it? And
100%.
And I'm saying this not.
Yes.
My point is, if it was within the power of the United States to remove troublesome actors, violent actors.
Yeah, I can tell you why. Because as we've seen with the Abraham Accords, many of these Gulf countries are wanting to turn over a new leaf. Even if their populations are still largely, maybe like more tribal or have more like Islamist beliefs, they are walking a fine line. And countries like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Bahrain and even countries like Jordan and North Africa, they want to be part of the modern world. They want to reap the benefits of having good relationships with the West. And if anything proved that, it was the Abraham Accords. Now, these
to play devil's advocate, I think the Abraham Accords are so possible because there is a united Sunni Israel United States coalition against the Iranians.
That's the point.
I wonder if Tim's hypothetical is true and we snap our fingers and the regime goes away, what does the Middle East look like without that counterbalance that could provide the predicate for such a coalition?
So wait, so let me say, so because the Gulf countries have these goals, right? What's the biggest hindrance to that? You just said it. It's Iran. Okay, they're all threatened. Iran has been trying to, in conjunction with Sunni groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, they have been trying to take out the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan, the House of Saud. They've been trying to take out the government of Oman, of Morocco, of Bahrain. I said Jordan. Okay, so these people
is that true? Is that true? Like, actually, I obviously there's a conflict with Saudi Arabia. But
go look at the work of like Yoram Ettinger. He has literally been this is his expertise. He's former ambassador and anyway, he has literally been documenting this for his entire career.
I'll say I don't want the Iranian regime to stick around, but there is a world where a perhaps feeble, inflamed and angry Shiite regime does some some modicum of good by rallying the rest of the civilized Arab
getting
world.
them to essentially I see what you're saying, and it's a possibility. But what I'm saying is that the Abraham Accords are not some like cold peace like what happened with Egypt and Israel, or Jordan and Israel, where it's like they're kind of still playing both sides, and sometimes they
Aren't they better?
Right?
Aren't they better than that?
The Abraham Accords, that is like real top down and ground up, like peace building.
Amazing.
On all
Amen.
sides. Okay.
How about Trump?
And so once that infrastructure, that architecture is in place, it's going to be very hard if you take out a nation like Iran, and these peace deals have already been signed, and they are in the same, like I said, it's not like a cold peace like the peace deals of Jordan or Egypt, but it's more of the Abraham Accords. Then that's going to be very, very hard to break up, because you have it happening on a people-to-people basis.
Do we remember
not
the
just
Middle
governments.
East before the Islamic regime? Obviously, it's not been great since, but before the Islamic regime, you had, 4 wars between different Arab states and the Israelis?
Well, that was the whole period of like pan-Arabism and that the whole I mean that was before these Gulf states had essentially decided to give up their Sunni fundamentalist beliefs and like come to the table and try to moderate and try to reform.
Yes, I hear you.
Even if they were secular, even if it was like a regime like Egypt, like right, they were still Arab. So even like the secular Arab states had these fanatical tribal views.
But that's why I wonder if the true best case scenario is an Iranian regime that is still a Shiite Islamic republic, but one that is closer to North Korea in its geopolitical and economic relationships with the rest of the world, genuinely isolated, but still in existence and kind of under the thumb of this Arab-Israeli coalition in the United States that doesn't pose a threat to to Israel certainly, and to the to the regional.
I can see what you're saying.
Counterbalance.
I'm not willing to keep a regime. Like I'm not willing to be like, keep this regime. I think that's what has led us to this point to begin with, is these strategies of like containment. This is what Israel's strategy has been since like day one of their existence. It's ridiculous. It's like the containment. Like the enemy I know is better than like the net. Like I think that has gotten in. That is what has allowed October 7th to happen.
Does the U.S. have the ground forces capable for occupying Iran?
No.
Well, they 100% do not. And also, like, I don't think there's anybody that would tolerate that. And even people who say we should like nuke Iran, I don't think any of them would, even the biggest war hawks, I don't think any of them would say. And the reason why they wouldn't say that, Tim, the reason why they wouldn't say we need to occupy Iran is because those people have some understanding of the differences between the Persian people and the Arab people.
Okay, well, my question was just if we have the forces to do so. The reason being, it sounds like the tactical nuke statement about we got to bunker bust and then nuke it is a big ask. The goal being, oh, no, I mean, all we can do is nuke it. There is another option, though. Israel's proposed human intervention with commandos. However, if you want commandos to go into Fordo to actually start dismantling and blowing all this stuff up, you're going to have to secure the entire region, which means you'll need a ground invasion first.
Not necessarily.
How do you
control the skies? I think that
you drop some one-way commandos into the Fordo to blow it up, and then Rogue One kamikaze themselves.
Well, I think it depends how much damage they've done before that takes place. Before the commando raid on Fordo actually commences.
You will not be able to.
I don't know. What I mean, but I could be wrong. I'm not Will. What is your assessment of that? I don't know.
It is a theoretical possibility. I think it requires probably the entirety of Israel's Tier 1 special operations forces. I'm frankly more concerned about what happens after they leave. What is the plan? Like, you just start smashing centrifuges with hammer. Presumably this is. I think it's achievable in concept if it is true that Iran doesn't have a robust air defense, then then I think, yes, it happens. But what it would look like, theoretically, let's say, is that Israel would focus precision fires and, covert action to what they call prepare the battlefield. And then, some combination of airborne and air assault forces. I think, you would need hundreds of Israeli commandos on the ground. And then probably what they call an outer cordon of more conventional but still special operations forces to prevent an Iranian counterattack, and then a whole host of air power. I mean, it's a 3 or 4 day operation at a minimum. It's incredibly risky, and I don't even have a good understanding of what Iranian military forces exist around Fordo itself. But I will say, I think there's a higher chance of success, even though it's much riskier with that than an airstrike. Because there has to be a battle damage assessment, I think, as you mentioned, Tim, earlier in the show. And that requires people on the ground. Maybe it's intelligence officers, maybe it's an asset. But at the end of the day, a lot of these activities result in quote unquote boots on the ground to figure out what the heck is going on in reality. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for Israel to do this with commandos. I mean, I think if the Israeli military has a strength that is in surgical precision operations that don't necessarily involve a commitment of sustained combat operations. So
let's just try this real quick. All right. So here's Google Earth, and it takes 27 years for this stupid thing to load. Google Maps is way better. All right, so here's Tehran. Fordo is just it's somewhat
northeast of it's. So there's the number 2 on the ground there. If you see that blue shield.
Blue 2. This right here?
There, to the left. Sorry, I guess.
This right here.
Yeah,
that
see
one.
that far?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I cannot.
So it's around there. It's around that number 2.
This is what?
Qom or Om is
right.
The town that's close.
So they're saying we are going to send Israeli commandos within driving distance of Tehran with 10 million people, and they're going to be able to waltz on in. One does not simply walk into Fordo nuclear facility and destroy their centrifuge.
Well, if you're a
no, they would be dropping bombs as well.
Yeah, but if you're a historian of U.S. military operations, the first effort to retrieve the American hostages from the embassy in Tehran was a joint special operations mission called Desert One that was not foiled by an Iranian airstrike or, enemy fire, but it was foiled by a plane crash and a helicopter crash at a kind of loitering area, an intermediate staging base in the desert of Iran that killed many Americans. It was a colossal failure, an embarrassment for the U.S. military. That's frankly left a huge stain and extended the hostage crisis by probably another many months.
There's Fordo.
So it's not even the fact that Iran might kind of kill Israelis with AK-47s or surface-to-air missiles. I mean, just imagine what it would take to stage Israeli commandos.
Yeah. If you don't have the element of surprise, then there's nothing there. But
so you can see Fordo's right here.
Don't forget about the thousands of Iranians, the thousands that have been carrying out this attack, this operation with Israel.
My point is how
including the now members of the Iranian military that have essentially defected and gone to and
right. So just my point, how do you get human beings to Fordo with enough time and resources, ordnance, to destroy a deep underground military base? Meaning they're going to have to be carrying explosives in. Engineers planting these things, detonating them, and escaping. It's a one-way trip. Yeah. So you're not
beyond my.
You're going to have to invade Iran. This is extremely close to Iran. It's in driving distance.
Can you find the nearest?
Why do you have? Wait, but what do you mean? Well, of course they're going to once you enter the country.
Because you have to eventually you have to land planes in order to get stuff big enough to
drop it by parachute and then go pick it up from wherever it landed.
I don't.
Right. Okay.
I would be surprised I think you'd have to land a plane somewhere.
Right.
So that's why I was asking Tim if you could find an airstrip nearby, because you'd either the mission is to either make an airstrip and that's possible, but very risky, or to find an airstrip that you can seize. This was the mission of my old unit, where you parachute onto an airstrip, and then you create we'll call it a lodgement, or an area that you control that's big enough where you can land planes in successive forces.
There's a domestic airport just north of Qom, and then you're gonna have to drive through a city.
Yeah.
If that were the case. So, I mean, you're talking about securing these sites first, which means you're not just going to airdrop some dudes in.
But do you guys not think that Israel, you guys don't think that Israel has secret knowledge that we're not privy?
I'm sure they do.
Sure. But the point is this: Israel has stated, if the U.S. doesn't do it, one of their options is human commandos infiltrating and destroying Fordo. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I have no idea. I mean,
it could be more covert.
Again, my point is,
I think it would be. I think it would obviously be an operation that involves not merely, this deliberate, commando raid and accompanying airstrikes, but also like massive cyber attacks and.
That doesn't change that 10 human beings with guns will be in a firefight with whoever you send in by air. The point is, knock out their electrical grid, destroy their gas stations, do whatever you got to do. If you want humans in Fordo, you have to secure the region. You've got to make sure nobody can get in, like you're saying, at least landing one plane.
I understand, but the risk is the IRGC. I mean, the risk isn't like insurgents.
I disagree. Partisans. I mean, in your experience, what do you think the likelihood of local militia just rising up if U.S. or Israeli troops are landing and
No way.
I don't know enough about it.
Why not?
I just don't think so, because I mean
What do you think would happen if?
Because I don't want to sound so. I'm my father's daughter.
If a plane flew over any rural area of the United States and dudes with Iranian flags were flying out with guns, random hillbillies would be shooting at them with pistols.
But that's because the population of Iran has a very different outlook on this, and I don't know. The intel I'm getting is.
You'll be greeted as liberators.
The poll.
Israel's invading! Hooray!
No. I think that. Well, look. Here's the breakdown that they'll tell you, and then what the intel that I'm getting is slightly different. But the breakdown that they're saying is that they say in all the websites and everything is that like 80% of the population is supportive of Israel, not just critical of the regime, but actually supportive of
80% of the Iranian population.
What I'm,
I don't know.
So, but it
will be greeted as
depends.
liberators.
It also, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but have you guys not been privy to like the communication between Iranians and Israel?
There was great reporting
for the last like over a decade. I mean, it's really stunning. And I feel like we're acting as if these are like sand people or something, and not like a highly civilized, sophisticated, educated population that is the least anti-Semitic in any Middle Eastern country, including many Western countries like France and Germany, where the overwhelming majority of the people have been trying to take out this regime, not just in 2022 with the Woman Life Freedom protest, but in 2017 and in 2009.
I don't believe any of that.
The reason why they're having trouble is because they're largely secular, these people, and they don't have the organizational structures that like Khomeini found with the mosques in the mosques.
I think
essentially was able to unite people.
But you have to think about the IRGC itself. I think the New York Times, it was the New York Times, Wall Street Journal today or yesterday had a report that the rank and file of the IRGC, that's where you find the genuine Islamic radicals. And so they're the guys with the guns. Perhaps they're still alive.
I don't believe for 2 seconds the majority of Iran supports Israel.
I do think that's a stretch. That's why I think there is still it is not
I don't know why Persians are very, very different than Arabs.
Because they're currently being bombed by Israel.
Look, is there
Yay, they've come to bomb us.
is there
finally.
some no, they're not being bombed by Israel. That's just not true.
Israel is bombing Iran.
They're not bombing the people.
They're bombing the assets of the country. I mean, like
They're not bombing
this is
civil.
a very
that is not true.
Who said
Tim,
civilian?
They're not.
This is retarded.
No.
Like,
That's
the
not what I
idea
was
that a
gonna say.
foreign country will bomb your country and you'll be like, "Yay!" is stupid. It's just stupid.
No.
It doesn't matter if it's military or otherwise. And I didn't say it was civilian. The idea that our military, any in the world, gets bombed and we go, "Hooray! Finally, it happened."
It is true. It is true.
No way.
That there is a small contingent, and this is I've seen a lot of these videos now. There is a contingent of Iranians who were supportive of Israel, and now they're worried. Even Iranians in the diaspora,
Sure,
because
and
they
there are
have
Americans who
family
support-
there
who
and
support
everything.
Hamas.
And they're worried about that. For
Imagine
sure.
imagine
But there's
Iran
a
playing
lot-
videos of
but
Hamas
there's
supporters
a lot of people,
and being
Tim,
like,
that
"Look,
have-
America actually supports Hamas."
Tim, the people, the Iranian diaspora that I speak to, almost all of them still have family there in Iran, and they are all praying for Israel's success, and they really,
not.
really do.
They're marching in the street
Okay.
in New York
That-
holding signs saying, "Stop bombing my home."
Well, and there's
Have you seen
still
those protesters?
Yes, I have. Do you know
Yeah.
how many protesters there are? Come
1,000,
on, you
2,000?
think that Iran has not activated their whole propagandist network on behalf of the regime? You know who these people are? These
and,
people.
and vice versa.
What do you mean?
Like you're sitting here right now trying to convince us that 80% of the people in Iran are supporting Israel.
Well, that's just what all the polls show on the internet.
Yeah, it's called propaganda. We will be
Propaganda
greeted.
by who?
That's what "we will be greeted as liberators" means. It means no, you will not. You are not going to bomb a foreign country in any capacity, be it industrial control systems or missile sites, and have the civilian population of that country cheer for you.
Tim, I wish I could literally just call up people right now and be like, talk to Tim Pool, Iranians. I wish I could bring.
What does that
Mazi
mean?
Elit-
What does that mean?
I wish that because they could tell you what they are hearing from people on the ground in Iran, or they are on the ground in Iran.
Do you understand the concern, though?
I am disinterested in magical logic based on anecdotal statements. There is a simple logic to all of this, and that is, if you're actually trying to convince people that a nation will overwhelmingly support the country bombing them, that is an absurdity. You might as well say the sky is purple. Sometimes it is, I guess, but no, people know it's not.
But it is. But it is true that right away, the Iraqi people were like, "Yay, Americans are liberators," and then within a year, it was like, "Oh shit, they really fucked this up." So it is possible that it is possible.
I don't know that it was
Iranian
ever
people-
that widespread.
Well, maybe it wasn't as widespread. I mean, you're talking about Arabs versus Persians. Again, a very different people.
You know, if there's a civil war, like if we're talking about how the North and South Vietnamese or the Koreas, and you said we'll be greeted as liberators, it's like, yes, by one of the warring factions, but Iran is not that.
Iran is not what?
In civil war.
There doesn't exist
there's
pre-existing domestic tensions of which we could take advantage.
But Tim, you have to be, in order to say something like that, you have to understand the ethnic makeup of the country, and you have to understand the position of the different ethnic groups, like the Kurds and the Turkic tribes and the Awazi Arabs and the Azeris. You have to understand the positions that they have taken since Israel started dropping bombs. A lot of these ethnic minorities, they have, their councils and their spokespeople and stuff like that of this institution and this institution, and a lot of them have put out statements in full support of what Israel is doing.
There's a difference between that and taking up blocking positions to prevent the IRGC from counterattacking Fordo when the Israelis land.
I agree with you.
The point
I agree with
stands.
you.
It's
But
not,
I agree with you.
The combat power of the Iranian military is in the hands of people dedicated, as you say, to Israel's destruction.
Fair point. I imagine if Chinese communists were landing at a region at Martinsburg Regional Airport and bombing, which is an Air Force base, or it's an Air National Guard. Imagine if they communist China, they bombed it, landed a plane there, and a bunch of dudes walked out. I bet there'd be a bunch of leftists cheering for them. Yeah, they'd be sitting there with signs being like, "Liberate us, please, bring communism."
Okay.
Well, I would, sure.
The point, and this is why I think people are suspicious, is we're trying to make the same case that we can analyze a Middle Eastern country, Southwest Asian country, in order to achieve and support military and geopolitical aims that are inherently unpredictable. Mm-hmm. It's the discourse surrounding the case for intervention, to me, is based on a little bit of hubris around guessing what will happen in a world where we can't assume nor guess what will happen.
Right. I think you're right, and I think I could fall prey to that as well, for sure. But I think that the other side of that is there's also a possibility that you don't have hubris and that you're actually just making calculated cost-benefit analysis, or like risk-benefit, calculations, and deciding that it's worth it, that the possible risk of like A, B, and C happening is worth it, is worth it for, to stop the possibility of.
But the people who bear the consequences of decision makers being wrong about that are going to be at least one generation of American and Israeli men who spend their 20s in this country, perhaps. That's what happened to us already. I was on the tail end of it, but it kind of defines my life and so we.
But not every situation is a rock. This is just a very different situation.
You're right. It is
and I think
different.
People are traumatized by that, and
but again, what do we hear?
A lot of people are projecting. I mean, I think that's the definition of fear mongering, right? Fear mongering about World War III, or about that this is just going to be like another Iraq. I don't think you're doing this, because I think you actually have some thoughtful, nuanced analysis. But I think a lot of the voices that are screaming about that on social media, like, that is the definition of fear mongering. It's essentially they're
claiming
scared
Iran will get a nuke and start nuking people. It's fear-mongering to claim that Iran will get a nuclear weapon and use it.
No. I'm saying that people screaming about World War III and
right, like if Iran got a nuke and started nuking people, it would start World War III, right?
Right, or no, just that if there was...
It wouldn't start World War III.
No, just there, like, look at Tucker Carlson's assessment from like a few weeks ago. If he said it very clearly, the first week of war with Iran, the first week, not America's war, but just war, any strike.
Wasn't he talking about U.S. involvement there?
Thousands. I remember reading the newsletter and seeing that, or the post or whatever, and it was just like the first week of war with Iran, right? A war with Iran, that this would be catastrophic, that this would be so catastrophic that our economy would be destroyed. We'd have $30, $40 gasoline. Thousands of American troops would die within the first week. Well, now we do have...
For a ground intervention,
right? No, strikes. Now we do have war. Now we do have war with Iran. It was coordinated with Trump, as he said. I'm prepared to trust our president. He's been the most transparent president, right? None of that has happened.
But it's all based on fear-mongering.
That's my point. That's all fear-mongering, because we've been so traumatized by what happening. No, saying that kind of stuff is fear-mongering.
World War III is going to start unless we invade.
No, I've never said that.
Well, but you have said that
Iran would nuke trade routes and all these other things immediately if they got a nuclear weapon.
Trade routes?
Yes.
No, that's not what I said. I said insurance costs and the risk models would change drastically. And I asked you specifically,
will Iran use a nuclear weapon if they get it?
And against Israel, yes. I believe yes.
Okay, will that trigger a mad response?
Mutually assured destruction.
You mean like an arms race and all that kind of stuff?
No, like, does anyone in the world anywhere retaliate against Iran if they nuke Israel?
Oh. Well, yeah, but to me, the World War III. But I've never once said that I've never said the words World War III, except in the context of other people talking about it.
So your point is Israel will get turned to glass by a nuclear bomb, and Western powers will go, well, I guess Israel's gone.
No, I think that.
You think the West will be like, we're going to destroy Iran now?
Yeah, I think that would start a global war. But I don't think.
So World War III.
But I don't think. But Tim, these are two different scenarios. What we're doing now is preventing that from happening.
Right, and you are fear-mongering people, telling them unless we strike Iran, there will be a global war. That's what you said.
Well, no,
that is called fear-mongering.
Well, I believe that that whether or not Iran has nukes, they are still a national security threat to the United States based on what already has happened.
Right. So are they going to get a nuke if we do nothing?
If America does nothing, or if
the
Israel
world,
does
anybody,
nothing?
if we just leave them alone, do they get a nuke?
I believe they are.
And then they're going to use it, right?
Yes.
And they will nuke Israel.
They've said they will.
Okay, so do you believe they will?
I believe them. I've listened to them.
Okay, and then there will be a
respect them
response from
enough
the
to
West
believe
on
them.
Iran, which will lead to a global war, right?
Okay, but Tim, I'm not sitting here saying I'm not going online or on podcasts or on the news saying like you asked me right at the beginning, what should America do? I said it depends how things play out. If I was fear mongering, then what I would have been doing is been coming onto your show and being like, we have to strike Iran. That's the only option.
But you did come on the
drop
show
a
and
nuke.
say that Iran has thousands of proxies in the United States waiting and ready to strike at any point.
I didn't say thousands. I said hundreds.
Okay.
Dozens. Some say hundreds.
You cast Iran as this global threat, working
No doubt they are.
Which I think leads people to define this
And I
as
think
fear
if
mongering.
anybody has just been looking, okay,
Like-
there are I am looking at the past, not the future. I'm looking at what they have done in the past. Already, people who are fear mongering are talking about things that could happen in the future.
Like you.
I'm only talking about things that we know has already happened, and
They're not
that
making
is and that is what we should
What
prevent.
Iranian proxy groups exist in the United
Well,
States? that have
who has
killed
Iran
Americans?
nuked already?
I'm talking about the sleeper cells in the United States
But who has
that
Iran
already
nuked?
exist. We know they exist.
Who have they nuked?
They're different. What are you talking about?
You said you're not
the
talking
sleeper cell-
about
who
what
have
they're
the
going to do,
sleeper
what
cell-
they've already done. And I said, who have they nuked? You said they will nuke Israel, and that you're not talking about
I
things.
believe that they will nuke Israel.
So you're talking about things they
You think
might
that
do,
me
not
saying-
things they've
but
already
you're-
done.
But okay, so your argument is that by me saying that they might nuke Israel, and we
Said
have
they
to,
will.
and we have, yeah, I believe they will.
So don't say might, say will.
Is there
difference.
But is there a possibility that they won't? Of course, depending on how things play out.
Okay, so
especially
maybe they don't.
especially now. But of course there's a
These are important
possibility.
distinctions.
Of course,
We're talking about
of course there's
the degree
a
of
possibility,
military
but I
intervention.
believe that they will. Based on all of my research and based on
Right, so my point is...
are you
I'll tell you the
saying
issue
that
I take
that
with what
is
you're saying.
fear mongering?
The issue is that these are straw man arguments that you are excluding yourself from your own disdain. You're saying they are claiming bad thing will happen while you are also claiming bad thing will happen. I don't care if it's right or wrong. The issue is it's like willfully obtuse. Like you don't realize you're telling people World War III is around the corner unless we do something. Then you're accusing other people of fear mongering.
Okay, so you're essentially saying that both camps, people who would potentially support intervention and people who never support intervention, are saying that there's going to be World War III, both of them, and so they're both fear mongering?
You said people like Tucker are fear mongering by claiming that if we get into war, thousands of soldiers will die. And I said, but you're claiming World War III will happen if we don't. How is that not also fear mongering?
Okay, that is. I'll tell you how it's different. Me saying that I believe that Iran will use a nuke at some point when they have a nuke against Israel, based on the fact that they've said this, is so different than saying in the first week that we have an Iran war, thousands of Americans will die, our economy will collapse, our gasoline will be 30.
Well, you're just talking about
$30. One of them is laying out a specific scenario that they are certain of based on proof and evidence that they clearly do not have, but they are trying to convince you of. And another one is saying that based on what these people have said, I believe that a general situation could arise that is a direct causation between having a nuclear bomb and using a nuclear bomb.
The same thing.
Those are
Literally
connected.
the same thing. So, for one, we can argue.
One to me is making incredible is associating things that you're trying to take two things and you're associating them with nothing in the middle that's connecting them. And the other thing is making a possibility based on an association
in World War
that everybody would understand.
In World War, are economies in shambles? Are they disrupted? The answer is yes.
Well, sure, but
do soldiers die? The answer is yes.
Okay,
we also have.
But even Will would agree with me that it's a ridiculous assessment to say that in the first week of a strike on Iran, our economy would collapse.
Is that what
even
he said? Just a strike?
Yes.
I don't think it's ridiculous to say that in the first weeks of a U.S.-Iran war, thousands of soldiers could die.
Why don't you look it up?
We have a very recent historical example of what we thought would be a fast, limited military intervention growing into a quagmire that distracted U.S. national security priorities and got a lot of Americans killed. We're not just associating everything that happens in the Middle East with the war in Iraq. We're, I think, drawing some reasonable conclusions about what happens when we think we have the chain of eventuality.
Well,
He didn't give a timeline. He said thousands of Americans would die. We'd lose the war.
This isn't the one I'm talking about.
Okay, then I don't know. You're saying
it might have been on his newsletter. I can't remember if it was a long post or on the newsletter. I'm sure if you just Google like Tucker $30 gasoline or $40 gasoline or something, it'll come up. Or maybe not because it's a newsletter, but I'm sure somebody posted the newsletter.
I mean, the price of oil was going up
and then it dropped.
before yesterday, right? When Trump said that there would be a...
Look, the difference is, Will, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't consider those quagmires in the past, but the difference is
let me read it. A few days ago, Tucker Carlson predicted what would happen after a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Thousands of Americans killed in the first week, collapse of our economy, $30 gasoline, then a world war where China and all of BRICS joins in to support them, writing, and then there's the question of the war itself. Iran may not have nukes, but it has a fearsome arsenal of ballistic missiles, many of which are aimed at U.S. military installations in the Gulf, as well as at our allies at a critical energy infrastructure. The first week of war with Iran could easily kill thousands of Americans. It could also collapse our economy as surging oil prices trigger unmanageable inflation. Consider the effects of gasoline. Oh, he said could several times, just like you.
Oh.
Yeah, and like, who cares if it's in the first week or the fifth week?
Okay.
This happening is a real possibility and a bad thing.
Okay. You're right. No, you're right. He said it could. He didn't say it will. You're absolutely right.
Could easily kill thousands of Americans. Okay.
I stand corrected.
And I want to clarify. I'm not saying your point about Iran nuking Israel is wrong. I was only taking issue with you saying one side was using fear and the other side was not.
Well, I just think that there's certain, Tim, I think that there's certain like slogans that are very trendy now to use. And I don't think that they're based on honest assessments. And I think like World War III like is one. I think I'm not dying for Israel is another one. And I think, regime change is another one. These are words
but those are straw mans. That I don't.
They've just no. Well, I'm not saying you're doing this, and obviously we need to consider. We need to talk about regime change and all that kind of stuff. But like people are now redefining regime. The way that they're using these words like regime change, they're basically saying that now like any military action that results in a different government is now like regime change. You know what I mean?
What's the opposite of fear mongering? Calm mongering? I'm going to calm monger. Guys,
it's Pollyannish.
Whether we strike Iran or not, literally nothing ever happens.
Well, that was, I think Michael Knowles tweeted the other day. He just had a tweet and it just said, so many panicans. Oh, yeah. This is great.
Nothing will ever happen.
Well, I hear a lot of people kind of urge folks. I think they're talking about perhaps people like me who don't necessarily, who want us to think long and hard about U.S. military intervention. I don't think it's panicking to lay out the risks of U.S. military action in this conflict.
It's not. It's not.
I don't think. But
Michael Knowles is. I just think these slogans are being used in much the way in a hysterical way that we often mock the left for.
I don't think World War III will happen if we bunker bust Iran. I don't think airstrikes will lead to an expanded war because I don't see anybody wanting to. China's not going to risk Beijing over Fordo.
No way.
They'll be mad. There will be repercussions, but I don't see it escalating into.
There was a lot of people in conversations on Tucker's show and Candace's show and stuff like that were talking about how Russia would defend Iran, and I'm sitting there listening, and I'm like, "Are you guys insane?"
Don't you think though that if Russia saw the United States, let's say the Guardian was right, and we do drop a tactical nuclear weapon on Fordo, I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that Russia has I don't know if they have the justification, but in their mind, they have the logical justification to use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine.
I don't think
I
so.
think that's a very good possibility, but
I think
you guys are bringing scenarios. You guys are talking about scenario. Like we started this whole conversation talking about a scenario that, in my mind, was not one of these scenarios that I was thinking in terms of people talking about World War III. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't tactical nukes. It was using bunker busting bombs, or maybe a commando raid, or maybe Israel using their own bombs. It wasn't actually dropping a nuke on Fordo, right? I think that things like that there's a different order of magnitude in terms of the consequences for our enemies and for our allies. And I think if, like Tim said, if it's just a strike or bunker busting bombs, I think anybody who says that Russia would get involved over that is just so ignorant about, the bandwidth that Russia can handle right now, and also Russia's relationship with Iran. Russia just said yesterday, they just said, sorry, we're not even going to hide you. We're not even going to provide you safe passage. And then the Ayatollahs came out and they're like, we're never going to forget this.
I think mutually assured destruction has been twisted beyond its original meaning, and I don't believe it currently exists necessarily. Mutually assured destruction was largely in reference to the Soviet Union and the United States, and that if either fired nukes on each other, it would cause just every ICBM flying through the air. If the U.S. were to nuke Iran, at Fordo specifically, I don't believe Russia would fire a nuke in Ukraine. I think Russia would fire a nuke in Ukraine if they felt it would give them an advantage, even right now. The idea that a nation would sacrifice its capital for some other nation, particularly Iran, I think is silly.
But if the time, but I think that depending on when it happened and where Russia was in Ukraine, I think that could change their assessment.
I think there's nothing stopping Russia from using nukes right now. No one in Europe or the United States is going to be like, time to go nuke Moscow because they bombed a battlefield or a rural area of Ukraine. It's just not going to happen.
I agree with you, but that doesn't. I think you're still undercounting the justification Russia would see to ratchet up.
Will's saying essentially that Russia
weapons that they feel comfortable using in Ukraine.
Yeah, Will's saying that essentially Russia would be able to say to the world that even though they don't really care what the world thinks of them, they know that in that case they could get away with it.
And it's largely, I agree, it's largely about what trade they can maintain, because what does global image really matter to a country at war? Russia needs supplies. And if they're seen as the first actor in a nuclear strike, they may get supplies cut off even from China. But no, then I would agree to a certain extent that there's a probability, should the U.S. use a nuke, Russia might be like, don't look at us, we didn't start this. Okay. But I don't imagine a scenario that makes sense where, we nuke Iran and then Russia is like, and then they fire on Ukraine and then India and Pakistan start firing at each other.
Right. But that's right. But it would, but that's not how world wars usually work. They are usually there are usually periods where they're just, they're little regional wars. And there's just conflicts going on in all these different areas, but they have been brought about because of some sort of action in a totally different region.
You know what? I'm done arguing. I'm pro-nuclear war now. I'm done with all the arguments. Everybody should just fire all the nukes now because it's the arguing I can't stand. There you go. And then we can live like it's
Amen.
Fallout. You guys see that show on Amazon? It was pretty good.
What show?
Fallout. It's a video game, but they made a TV show. Life after a nuclear apocalypse.
Yeah, start digging.
Yeah, we can all go live in bunkers. So interestingly, the subway system in Ukraine is like 300 feet underground.
Oh, just perfect.
Because
the Soviets built it, right?
Because of fear of nuclear war. Really? Man, you got to go down so many escalators. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, how long does that take?
To get down there?
Yeah.
No, it's not long. It's just like 5 escalators. So it's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh yeah. Oh, but it's like 5 full escalators.
Yeah.
No, but that's
it's wild.
I guess right. It's not a lot of time, but it is like, if you think about taking 5 escalators down to get to the subway, that is like a ton of
Yeah, it's a few minutes, where it's like in New York, you run on the stairs in 30 seconds, you're there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah,
and they're beautiful too. Not all of them, but they're like, they take care of their subways. They make them look fancy.
You've been there?
Are you saying you want to move to Ukraine?
I did. I actually considered it back in like 2014 or 15 because of how cheap it is to live there and the time zone and the news reporting. I was doing field work on the ground. But
it's what a lot of American tech companies had software developers in Ukraine before.
Yeah, because you pay them $60,000, $70,000 a year and they're kings.
Yep.
There you go.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Well, we're about rounding things out. This has been a lot of fun. Do you want to any final thoughts or where people can find you?
I'm pretty active on X. It's just my last name and my first name switched, so at Rhea Karys. And yeah, that's basically it.
All right, on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to both of you. I'm at William Thibeau on X. Check out the Claremont Institute. And, think about how things can change in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is a big ask. Trump gets under the table and shuts it all down. I hope it doesn't. But I'm actually thinking, based on the news, that we're heading towards some kind of U.S. strike. So we'll see. But my friends, we're going to be sending you off to hang out with our friend Jeremy Hambley over at the Quartering. So don't forget to smash that like button, share the show with everyone you know. We'll be back tonight at 8 p.m. for Timcast IRL. And maybe there will be some news developments, or maybe it'll be a goofy Friday because there is no news and we're just going to, hang out and have fun. So you can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Once again, share the show with everyone you know, and we will see you all tonight.